tomorrow is my birthday! No, not my birthday. But if you went to college with me, you historically heard that today, January 25th. Why? Because tomorrow is my friend Paul's birthday. And for about 2 weeks before Paul's birthday, every day he would walk into the cafeteria and he would announce, 10 days until my birthday. And you're like, wow, that sounds kind of annoying. And when I talk about it, it does, but it wasn't annoying because it was Paul. Let me explain Paul to you. Paul is inarguably one of the coolest people I have ever met in my life. Like, what made Paul so cool? I don't know. Just like, he was just Paul. Like, there wasn't anything you could point to and be like, okay, that's what makes him awesome. He was just awesome. He was just himself, you know? So a few weeks ago, I was up for like 33 or 34 hours straight, and one of the last things that I did before I finally went to sleep was that I recorded a video about Paul. And I have apparently at some point between now and then deleted that video. Bad idea. But I wanted to retell that story quickly. So there was one time in college when Paul had like a lot of stuff to do, so he stayed up all night doing it. And then he had a lot of stuff to do the next night, so he stayed up all night doing it. And then he just decided that he wasn't going to go to sleep, so he stayed up all night again. And then he went to class and everything the next day, and it got to be like 8 or 9 o'clock, and we were like, hey Paul, don't you think maybe you should, like, I don't know, go to sleep since you've been up for like 80 some hours? And he's like, no, I'm fine, I'm just not going to sleep anymore. And he was getting crazy. And he's like, I don't need to sleep. Sleep is not something you need. And eventually we convinced him that he didn't need to sleep, but that he wanted to sleep. And he went to sleep for like 15 hours. It was great. I'll probably cut this out of the video, which now that I say that, I'll probably leave it in. I always, when I think of Paul, think of the fact that we used to always gather in his room, in his dorm room every day to watch cartoons. We would watch Digimon, and we would watch Transformers, Beast Wars. Paul was kind of the leader of that group, and really of our group of friends in a lot of ways. So we took to calling him Optimus Paul. Optimus Paul was also the girls' arm wrestling champion in college, so that was pretty cool. He and I kind of went back and forth on holding the lightweight belt for dorm wrestling. Not that we did that, since that would have been against the rules. And speaking of wrestling, I remember one year in class, one of our teachers, something happened with his babysitter, and his son was like 8 or 9, so he explained to him, hey, you can come to school with me today, but I need you to be quiet. So he just kind of sat at the front of the class, like drawing or coloring or playing his Game Boy or something. And at the beginning of class, the teacher introduced his son and was like, oh, blah, blah, this is my son, blah, 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 which I always thought was kind of a strange name. And really, it's a girl's name because the girl that Bismarck he met, her name was blah, blah, blah. Anyway, blah, blah had like a wrestling belt, which I think was made out of like tinfoil, and was probably just like over his regular belt. Anyway, that particular day in class, we were all sitting there like taking notes and stuff, and all of a sudden one of the legs broke off of Paul's chair, and he just falls to the floor. And everybody looks at him, and the teacher, in one of those moments of like, really? Was just like, what do you have to say for yourself? And Paul stands up and shouts, I want a shot at the title! And everyone just laughs. And the teacher turns to his son and says, what do you think? WrestleMania? And the son gets up and like lifts the belt above his head, and Paul kind of maybe you had to be there, but it was one of the most amazing things I have seen in my entire life. Yeah, I mean, I have just so many memories that it's hard to sit here and say, oh, here's who Paul is, because there's just so many awesome stories. Paul and I were roommates one year, and we kind of made it our goal, well, one semester, we kind of made it our goal to throw up out our window. Paul, like, always made fun of me because it would take me like 20 minutes to beat Ganondorf. At the same time, though, he gave me some respect for the fact that I could survive battling Ganondorf for 20 minutes. That's not an easy task. You gotta take that guy down, because he gets some new attacks after like 5 minutes. Seriously. When I first met Paul, I was like, dude, what's up with this guy? Like, I don't know, he seems kind of weird. And then I was like, this guy's awesome. So, yeah. Paul was awesome. That's kind of the point of this video. I had a really great story and now I forget it. But, man, some of these I'm thinking of stuff and I'm like, I don't want to tell that story. I don't want to tell that story. I don't want to tell that story. There are so many good ones that I get to be really picky in this. Yeah, Paul and I lived on the same dorm for 5 years, and man, you get to know somebody pretty well in 5 years. And Paul was just like one of those guys that you see and you're like, wow, this guy's just legit. I remember one day Paul borrowed somebody's guitar and learned to play a song that was like 2 chords. And then he just sat there and played it for like 3 hours. And somebody was like, Paul, why don't you play a different song? And he's like, I don't know any other songs. I just learned these 2 chords so I could learn this song that only uses those 2 chords. I'm sorry, there's just so many funny stories. Like, you have no idea how awesome Paul is. I feel like Paul was kind of the leader of our group of friends. Or maybe not the leader so much as like, he was... I feel like Paul was really kind of the glue of our group of friends. Like, we all got along, and at varying points we were like super close to varying people. But if Paul hadn't been there, probably would have fallen apart. Even if like Paul wasn't the guy that you hung out with the most or whatever, Paul was the one that kind of held the group together. You want to see something impossible? Try to wake Paul. Seriously. There were days when we would like be in his dorm room and for some reason we'd want to wake him when he was sleeping and we'd like shake him and like yell at him. Nothing. The only way that you could wake Paul was to reset his alarm so that it was about to go off. Which then you had to make sure you told him you did that so that, or like remind him to set it for the time that it was originally set for so that you didn't like miss class or anything. Which I don't think that I was ever responsible for that happening, but anyway, yeah. His alarm would wake him, no problem, but nothing else would wake the guy. Paul and I were both kind of introverts. When we lived together though, it was like everyone wanted to hang out in our room, which was kind of cool, but we played board games a lot when people would come and hang out, so that was awesome because board games are one of my favorite things. If you're watching this and we're friends and you live in Seattle, or if you just live in Seattle and you don't even know me and you want to play board games, let me know. I love board games. Paul rocked so hard that his kidneys made stones. Yeah, that's right, I made that joke. We went to a private Christian school and our dorms were not co-ed, like we couldn't have girls in our dorm except one day a year when we were allowed to. So most people go through and like clean their rooms a lot on that day. Not Paul and I. We went through and dumped our dresser drawers on the ground and took everything off the shelf and just like scattered it around our room. So our room was intentionally messy, like just piles of clothes and books and whatever else we could find. Everything on the floor. I haven't gotten a lot of stuff in the mail in the last few months, which, I mean, I don't get that much stuff in the mail in general, other than like bills and junk mail and magazines. But I got 2 Christmas cards this year. I think that's accurate. One of them was from Paul. Yeah. And also, I got in the mail this book from Paul. The Time Traveler's Handbook. Link in the description. It's really cool. It's got like crazy stuff you can do if you travel time, like how to graduate from gladiator school. With pictures. How to make a flint axe. How to travel on the Underground Railroad. Somewhere in here, I didn't flip to it right now, but it's how to tackle a T-Rex. Okay, who doesn't need to know that? Everyone should know how to tackle a T-Rex. And I think Paul would agree with me on that. So Paul, you know that our group of friends is not necessarily the best about getting things done. But I sent messages to a few people about this, and anyway, Dan made a video, which I'll link. Let's see, given the camera angle, I'll link it right here. Yeah, so check that out.